All right. Hello, everyone, and good evening. We welcome you tonight to the Board of Ed and the NAACP Parent Council meeting. This should be an interesting discussion. We're very fortunate to have everyone here. We have representation from the Board of Education, MCPS. I do want to just let everyone know early, and we'll let Byron reinforce this, that because of the number of people we anticipate joining this evening, we will be doing breakout rooms. There will be facilitators, and we will be automatically placing you into those rooms. For those of you all who are familiar with Zoom, you'll know to go ahead and enter when you see join. If you're not, when you see the join, just we ask that you join. However, Board of Ed members, we're going to ask that you do not join so we can allow us to place you in each break room. That way we'll have suitable coverage to make sure all topics are discussed, okay? So again, Board of Ed members, do not push join. We're going to put you in the appropriate breakout session. With that said, again, we thank you. We welcome everyone. And I'm going to move it on to Byron Johns, our president.
Well, good evening, all, and we very much appreciate people joining. This is a highlight, one of our highlight parent council meetings is with the Board of Ed. And we're going to do some brief intros in a second. But one thing I want to make sure people are aware that this is being live streamed. It is on MCPS TV and the YouTube channel and another channel somewhere. I want you to be aware because everybody's going to be on their best behavior, which of course we always are. But you should just be cognizant of that. And please keep your microphones on mute so we don't have that bothering. And when you're called on, certainly go off mute and ask your questions. So this format will be the breakouts will give you a chance to really interact and engage and share your thoughts and concerns with members. So let's make sure that that you are prepared to do that. Okay. So with that, let me do a quick introduction of the board members, and we will we'll start there. And all right, I hope I don't have an echo. Here we go. And so I'm looking across the board, and I'll end with, well, let me start with President Brenda Wolff, who, Brenda, do you want to make some opening comments? Oh, you're on mute. You're still on mute.
I'm trying to get off. Wait a minute now. I think I'm off now, right?
Well, we hear you.
So
I'm off now, right?
We'll do this. So we'll exchange the medication.
Good evening. I'm hearing a lot of feedback. Okay. Good evening. It's great to be here with you all this evening. I really wish we could be in person. I'm really tired of Zoom. But if we've learned nothing else this pandemic year, we know how to connect this way. It's been a trying year for all of us, trying to keep our families safe while we figure out how to move forward. Parenting through this, including myself, these have all been acts of heroism. I've been the grandmother in charge of an online first grader, and you can imagine what that's been like. But as we look forward, we are committed to our shared work of building a more equitable school system. We must work together to address disparities in opportunity. Hearing from MCPS families and their lived experiences informs our board work. So we appreciate the dedication you have by coming here tonight to share with us. I'm going to ask each of our board members to introduce themselves at this time. I'm going to start with our Vice President, Ms. Silvestri.
Good afternoon, everyone. Carla Silvestre, happy to be here.
Dr. Daka.
Judy Daka, glad to see you. Thank you.
Ms. Smandrowski.
Yes, good evening. I'm Rebecca Smandrowski. Nice to see everybody. Thank you.
Ms. Evans.
Good evening. Always good to be here with you all. Looking forward to the discussion.
Mr. Asante,
Good evening. I'm Nick Asante. I'm excited to see everyone.
Ms. O'Neill,
Good evening. I'm happy to be with you all, and I look forward to happier days when we can all be together in person.
I'm not sure whether Ms. Harris has connected yet, and I'm afraid to move off of this page because I have a new computer and I'm not sure how to work it. So if you're here, Ms. Harris, please identify yourself, say a few words. I don't think she's connected yet. So back to you, Byron. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Brenda. And so we have 3 broad topics that we are going to touch on, and I'll open up with a softball question. I'm sure you're looking forward to that one. But the 3 broad topics that we wanted to touch on are going to be on the school reopening, then equity in learning and restorative justice, and the loss of learning and mitigation efforts. So I know those are all efforts that are underway. You and MCPS staff have put in tremendous hours working through these complex questions and problems, and are going to, we look forward to hearing kind of the status and whatever you can share. So let me throw the easy question, because I will tell you, as a parent of a college student, which I just learned, her colleges, she's up in New York, and all the colleges in New York are starting to require, to return to classes, vaccination is required. So let me ask the question. Given that vaccines are required to attend school otherwise, will the board be considering mandating COVID vaccines for staff and students when schools fully reopen? So that's a nice, easy question. I'll let you give us your thoughts.
Well, Essie is here and she can speak to that, but I would say no. The answer is no at this time. There's no requirement there's no state requirement that they have a vaccination in order to be in the school. So I would say no.
Yeah, I thought it was a state mandated type of thing.
I don't think so. Essie, you're on. I know I saw you. It's not mandated.
I'm here, thank you. And yes, you're both correct. Typically, those types of mandates do come to us through the state. And so certainly we would be looking to them for any guidance. And of course, we comply with any requirements that come through the state Department of Health or MSD.
Now, we can't mandate vaccines for children because there are none right now.
And the other piece about it is currently all the vaccines that have been approved for adults, which haven't been approved below age 16, are also approved under emergency use authorizations. So I think it's a murky area, but the required vaccines in Maryland are mandated by the State Department of Health, but the emergency use authorization, as I understand it, makes it grayer. I think when it moves to a standard authorization, you may see that in states coming soon.
And I'll add one more thing. I just want to say that the board took action to send a letter to our governor to get our educators added in the category 1B, as well as we've tried to make the vaccination widely available to our staff who are interested in getting that vaccination. So that's work that the board has done.
Great. Thank you. Any other comment? Questions?
Mr. Johns, I will also add that there are considerations under the ADA compliance before an employer can make this vaccines a mandate. We would have to demonstrate a business need that cannot be accommodated by any other means. And since the vaccine is not confirmed whether or not it contains spread. The fact that we have other accommodations in place would make it a challenge for us to make such a mandate and still be in compliance with the ADA.
I just wanted to mention that I think we got figures last night about 16,000 of our employees have been vaccinated, but I'll leave that up to Essie because she was the one that gave us that information last.
Actually, I can jump in there. Dr. Doc can help with that. Good evening again, everyone. It was actually Helen Nixon who has been working the partnership with Hopkins and other health providers to administer vaccines to our staff. We were excited and able to share that we've been able to provide vaccinations to over 16,000 of our staff members at this point. And we were also able to share that through our partnership with all of those health agencies, we have been able to submit the names of all of our staff to receive appointments for vaccinations. So that was absolutely very joyous for us to be able to do that, because the purpose of the vaccine is to be able to provide that protection during COVID-19 so that we are able to resume to normal activity. So yeah, very excited to share that information.
Great, thank you. Okay, we'll go to the next round of more challenging questions. So on one of the issues on equity and learning. So Black and Brown students prior to the pandemic had experienced disproportionate disciplinary referrals and more severe consequences, often for the same behaviors as their white and Asian peers. Many Black families have expressed some concern, and they have been experienced disproportionately impacted by the pandemic and concerned about the trauma their children have experienced. How will the district prepare to better support students with adverse childhood experiences? And will there be any oversight or efforts to get in front of any potential increased discipline disparities?
So I can start with that, Mr. Johns. The work of restorative justice has been really expanding tremendously in the system over the last 4 years. There were 9 pilot schools in the summer of 2016. And at this point, we're well up over 50% of all schools have had substantial training. And this summer, all schools will receive it. So therefore, all school staff will be engaged in that. And we have seen good progress, or some progress. I won't label it good or bad, but some progress in the reduction of disciplinary actions overall. But it's not yet on par. There still is disparity, and that needs to continue to be addressed. And we need to continue to provide strategies to our educators in all roles, everybody in the system, whether it's a bus operator, a paraeducator, a teacher, a principal, around restorative practices and the way to proceed. And there is a great deal of work going on in that area, has been, will continue to be, and this summer a tremendous effort will go forward to provide that training to everyone, because if you're going to work in Montgomery County Public Schools, you cannot opt out of that work. You cannot say, I'm not interested in that. And so that's kind of a big overview of where we've been the last few years and where we're headed.
And Byron, if I could just add that when I met with your executive board last week, there was a request that we remind the principals that our students have had a rough year and that we might want to consider alternatives to the strict discipline policy that we might have in place, using more of our restorative justice practices. And I did take that back to Dr. Smith and Dr. Mcknight, and it was well received. And we plan to get some guidance out to them either later this week or early next week.
And if Dr. Mcknight could expand a little bit about on how the social emotional lessons have been built into the school day so that the teachers themselves are addressing some of the topics that that our students are experiencing. I think that's important as well.
Sure, I am happy to share. So as we know, I mean, and in the very question you stated, Byron, so we had a number of disparities prior to the pandemic. And that's why the first thing for us to do is to constantly evaluate our processes and procedures to see who are they helping, who are they hindering progress. And as we have experienced a number of things through the pandemic, not just the effects of the pandemic, but there have been ongoing issues that we've had to manage as a nation, as a state, that finally we're into our own school systems. I'll elevate the importance of the anti-racist audit and thank you up front for all of the contributions that NAACP have contributed in terms of having your members take a part in that, because that's how we actually spend the time to step back and say, how are our structures of how we do discipline, all of our programs, and really evaluate them and say what's working and who is it working for, and what's not working and who is it not working for, to actually call us to make the changes that we have to make. Now, so I just needed to say that because it was so related to the question. As Ms. Silvestri pointed out, social emotional wellness has always been a big component of what we have to do to make sure our students are just well. A big part of what we have to do is enhance the learning and provide the learning for them when they come into our school buildings. But if they're not, if they aren't well socially and emotionally, it's hard to be able to reach them academically. So the pandemic provided an opportunity for us to reiterate why having those social emotional lessons for our students available when they were disconnected were really important. And it became an opportunity in which we had to just stop, take a step back, and provide the time to actually do that, and not just jump into the content, but allow the time for the relationship building to happen amongst students, with each other, and between the staff and the students. And so those are the things that we have provided during the pandemic through lessons that we've engaged students in, and lessons just having them reflect on their own needs, how they've been impacted by the pandemic, and what we can do to help and support them, and to also navigate really big social things that they're trying to understand and make sense of, that they're seeing happening nationally, whether it relates to race and culture, that they also have to try and figure out while we're all, have been separated over the past year. So those lessons have been really instrumental in that way, and moving forward, they will continue to be instrumental, because those are conversations we still have to continue to have as we go back into in-person learning and prepare for full-time in-person learning in the fall, to make sure that we are taking the time to take care of the social emotional wellness state of our students so that they can be ready to thrive academically. And so I just emphasize that, because it's something that we have to hold on to beyond the pandemic, because that's what contributes to our students being available and being whole when they walk into our school buildings.
The phrase for the years, I'm on mute, so appreciate, thank you for that response. So I think we're going to get ready to transition to our breakout rooms, so we'll be able to have more, well, not, I'll say it, more intimate, at least, conversation.
Excuse me, Byron.
With that,
Brenda has a question. Go ahead, Brenda.
No, I don't have a question. We've been joined by Lynn Harris. I just wanted her to be able to say hi and greet you all. Lynn?
Hi, everyone. Sorry I'm late. I'm trying to do a couple things at once.
Totally understand. Totally understand. Byron, are you going to do the breakout sessions and then make me host so I can move the...
Nope, I'm going to make you host.
Okay.
I thought I did that already, but I'm going to let you run that right now.
All right.
Byron?
Okay.
Byron?
Yes.
In addition to our board members,
ahead.
We do have Dr. Smith and Dr. Mcknight and some other staff who work with us side by side all the time. I don't know that everybody knows them. Do we have time?
That's a great point. Thank you, Sabrina. I meant to cover that. So I want to first acknowledge Superintendent Jack Smith, who has been with us through the very beginning. He is with bittersweet. I know he's certainly worked hard and has a lot, but will be retiring as of June 1st, I believe. So we will be certainly missing Jack at when that happens, but we wish him all the best in that. We also have with us the woman with the longest title, I think ever. I think she's the prior deputy superintendent who is now the acting interim superintendent, who will soon be the interim superintendent of Montgomery County Public Schools. Did I get that right, Monifa?
No. Is the acting superintendent and then the interim superintendent.
Okay. I see. I thought I had rehearsed all that, but it's a very long title. But we're so pleased to have you here. We also have with us Karen Stratman is the chief of staff. I don't know the people, many of our folks. Karen is down there. Raise your hand. And next to Karen in my board is Derek Turner. And Derek has been a speaker with the Parents Council on one or two prior occasions. So we are glad to have you here. Let's see, who else? Anybody else I missed? We heard from Essie McGuire. Essie is in the chief of operations, and it deals with many issues, meals to wheels to buildings. So a lot going on. And I think that's all I see here at this point.
Janet Wilson.
Who else? Where's Janet?
Dr. Wilson, yeah.
Oh my God, I apologize.
And Helen
Nixon. I just left the meeting with
Helen Nixon is also here. Helen.
My apologies, Janet. Janet is oh my gosh. Janet, what's your title, please, so people know?
Chief of Teaching Learning in Schools.
Yes,
That's okay, Byron. It's hard to see. There's 4 screens here, which is a good sign. Lots of participation.
Lots of good.
Helen Nixon is also here just to help you out, and also Stephanie Williams.
So for those, again, Stephanie Williams is the acting general counsel, and Helen Nixon is our new head of human resources, OHRD. So there we go. Thank you for clarifying that, making the introduction. So Angela, do you want to handle the breakouts?
I'm going to repeat what I said earlier in the meeting. Again, we welcome and so glad everyone's here, along with the Board of Ed members and our MCPS people who are here. We're going to have our parent council participants serving as facilitators. As Byron mentioned, we have 3 topics. School reopenings. For that breakout room, we're going to have Shannon Cisco. For loss of learning, we're going to have Sophie Cisse. And for equity and learning and restorative justice leading, we're going to have Walia Chase. Again, I'm going to ask that Board of Ed members, as well as facilitators, do not click join. We're going to be putting everybody in automatic rooms, but don't push joins for the BOE members and the facilitators, and we'll put you in the appropriate one. So hang on.
So before we go, just remember the ground rules. This is televised. Well, the breakout rooms are not televised. So you can certainly engage with your praise and questions and problems, whatever, but the board members want to hear from you members of the community.
Okay. Thank you, Byron, for that reminder. Okay, here we go.
received an invitation the other day about summer school. I'm glad you mentioned that because I was a little confused about the word invite. So please explain what invite means. Does that mean that all the children are coming or selected? I need to understand what invite means. Thank you.
That's a great question. Schools have lots of data at their fingertips, and they have the data historically from actually many years back on each and then in individual children. In addition to that, our central office is creating data files that will, they're formula based, and they will flag students who we believe at central office need to have an intentional invite to summer school. We also know, though, and have to appreciate that the schools have the most in-depth knowledge of their students. And so they may or may not agree with our flags, and that's certainly their prerogative because we know they know things about our children and their needs that we don't know centrally. So schools are beginning to send out those invites because we know that we have to have a priority in terms of who we're going to serve in summer school. We really want seats for everyone, but we also know that we have to get our most heavily impacted students in, are those students that we know can benefit by some extra time in especially the foundational skills.
Just a little factoid, we had almost 50,000 individual students go to summer school last summer and 80,000 slots. And we're going to exceed that this year. But we know that with 160,000 students, a lot of those slots will fill up very quickly. And we want to make sure that the children who will benefit the most or have had the most disruption have the first option at those seats. That's really the theory there. And then later on, the seats will be opened up to everyone. But everybody's welcome, but there is priority for children that need that the most, for whatever reason.
I'm thrilled that you've received that invitation already. That's wonderful news.
Yeah, I was expecting it, so I was happy to see it also. My child goes to a Title I school, so that's very good.
That's great. Thank you very much for sharing that.
Are there any other questions from for the board members or the members of the
Yes. Hi, this is Betsy Perry. I'm a special education teacher. Hi, Miss Evans, and also a parent. And we had a lot of discussion about social and emotional well-being, and I appreciate and applaud all of the efforts that the Board of Education and MCPS is doing for restorative justice. I'm just concerned because we do have students that have faced a lot of trauma, and I'm hoping that everyone will listen to the teachers who are the main ones in the trenches, in the classrooms. Just personally with my caseload, I'm just hoping that there are going to be extra staff, training and support for teachers and the community, because many of our students have experienced a lot of trauma during COVID for various reasons. And I'm just hoping and asking that the board is going to consider ensuring that we have appropriate supports in place for staff, the students, and the community.
I'll just say thank you, Ms. Perry, for that comment, question. And those are all concerns that the board has had and discussions that we have constantly with our school system. I'm really grateful that we were able to very early on create, and we talked about keeping on the student well-being teams, am I saying that correctly? To be able to discuss early on the students that were not engaged or that we weren't seeing connect. And so I think many of the things that are coming to fruition right now are what you see as a result of various schools having the discussion and getting back with the system. So I just would encourage everyone to continue to look at our board meetings. At the beginning of every board meeting, we have the Recovery of Learning discussion, and it's really informative and will actually answer a lot of the questions that you all are asking today, that we as board members are asking of the system. We have really great partners in MCPS. And so many of the questions that we ask, oftentimes the questions are already being answered because staff is already thinking about those things as well because of what they're hearing at the school level. Thank you.
So I would also like to add, if I may, that a bulk of our what we call Tier 1 training, required training for the summer for our teachers is focused on social emotional learning and signs of trauma. We have modules that we're going to be asking our teachers, our paraprofessionals to engage in because we know that our teachers, and hi Betsy, it's nice to hear from you. I haven't talked with you lately. That our teachers and our paraprofessionals in the classroom will be seeing many of those signs first, and we will need to depend on them to get that information to counselors and the well-being teams. So we are focusing on those kinds of trainings this summer because we're bringing students back together, and we have to be prepared for many of the implications of the pandemic on our families.
And I wanted to just pipe in too, I hope that we are all also focused on the fact that it's not just our students that have been traumatized. All of our teachers and staff have also been through quite a 15 months. And I think one of the things that I am most hopeful about as we really start to embrace, as we sort of have been saying for a while, we were, but now I think we really have made a commitment to embrace trauma-informed practices throughout every school. Because my hope is that we're really going to be creating cultures and climates in which we're all looking out for each other. And that means, teachers and staff looking out for students, and students looking out for students, and staff members looking out for staff members, and students looking out for staff members, and everybody having a little bit of a grounding and a few skills to recognize signs of stress and triggering in themselves and in others, so that everybody looking out, having that little bit of understanding to help support whomever needs to be supported whenever they need to be supported.
Okay.
Just wanted to add that we are having a budget meeting in a few weeks because the budget was so crazy this year and unsettled. And so now that we have the dust has settled, I think that it will be an opportunity for us as board members to look at the budget and see how we're doing to meet the needs that you have just brought up, this need about more support in our schools.
So it is clear that a whole system response is necessary, just to the point that Ms. Harris made and you, Carla, that we all have been going through some form of having to adjust to what we've been through in these past few months. I'm not sure if the question's been asked in the other sessions about how MCPS plans to assess and diagnose student learning loss and IEPs being developed for students to get and keep them on grade level. And if it hasn't been, could any one of you speak to that at all?
There is a whole system response, and it involves really 4 big buckets of work, as well as the operations of the system to support those 4 buckets. And I'll put Dr. Mcknight on the spot because she's been chairing the advisory group that works with all of the extended stakeholder committees. Many of the people on this Zoom and other people from many different stakeholder groups across the county are involved. And I think if she talked a little bit about that, it would help people see the picture of how all these pieces fit together that you just brought forth all of the pieces that are so critical to the future for our students and our families. Dr. Mcknight?
Absolutely. So many of the questions that you're asking fit into those 4 buckets. We call it the 2.5-year plan that we have been talking about for the past months. And the 4 areas are: 1, mitigating learning disruption. And the purpose of that plan and that group is to come up with a way to assess and evaluate what has the impact been for all of our students on their learning during the pandemic. And so that is thinking about how are we being intentional about the students who need to be invited into summer programs. And then specifically, as our students return in the fall, what type of support are they going to need to address any learning disruption that's happened? And so a big part of that is us figuring or really thinking about the summer. What are going to be the indicators to help us get a good sense of what has been the impact on summer school going into the fall? And in the fall, when we're back for 5 days a week, every week, then really looking at assessments and saying, how are we going to assess the students and where they are? And then how are we going to respond to it? And so that's what that group is all about. The second group is about supporting our high need schools and us really developing a model of the things that you talked about. It's social work, all the community supports that are necessary to put in a school that does have a need for there to be more community supports to help our students be successful, so that it's not a whole nother step for families and students to get the resources that they need in order to be successful in school. So focusing on that community school model is the intention to do just that. The third area of focus is what we have been talking about, the social emotional well-being of staff and students. I mean, that the impact on staff and students throughout the pandemic has been great. And we've had an opportunity to learn over the past year of what some of the impact has been and how we have been able to support staff virtually. But as they come back in and get into an environment where they're supporting one another, and some of the loss that's taking place, whether it's been job loss, whether it has been family members lost, those things are still there and people are still impacted by it, even if they've been vaccinated. So our goal is to figure out what have those most impactful pieces been that need to be addressed for our students and our staff, and putting specific programs and supports in place to make sure their social and emotional wellness is at the forefront of what needs to be done. And as Betsy said earlier, what's the training necessary for the staff to make sure they can provide that for students? And then what do we need to provide for staff to make sure they are equipped to be who they need to be for our students? And then the fourth category is the virtual and the virtual school. And that is absolutely the opportunity for us to provide the virtual experience for those who have special circumstances and need to have other options. And so that may be, a number of different circumstances. And some of these circumstances, we had not figured out prior to the pandemic, like our students who someone mentioned earlier, that may drop out because the need is so great for them to work and do other things. This is an opportunity for us to think about what are all those circumstances to help our students be successful in a number of different areas. So that's what that virtual school part is all about. And this is what the system presented to the Board of Education in terms of a priority for our budget and focusing on those 4 areas, and also involved in how do we make sure we have a good, strong operational system infrastructure to support all of these needs post the pandemic. So as we have those conversations with the board about our budget, this is exactly the conversation that we will be having, focus on all of these areas that we're discussing tonight. And I don't want to say, I would be remiss if I did not mention this. The critical part of how we have approached that work is to engage our community members in the discussion and in the planning. I mean, we've been educators for a long period of time. This year, for everyone, it was like doing your job for the first time. I don't think there's anybody who cannot, connect with that. And so there's so many things that we have learned about that. And we need to hear from our parents. We need to hear from our community leaders, everyone, in terms of how do we figure out these things together. And so having community representation, parent representation, student voice representation, and, you know, faith-based representation in all of these groups is what's going to help make our plan the most meaningful one for all of our students in our community. So that's our 2.5-year plan. And I think we talked about it earlier, Byron, in our NAACP Parents Council a couple of months ago, but we will continue to talk about that because that's the basis of our work moving forward.
And I just wanted to add, I thought it was very interesting, Sophie, that you mentioned that we need a system response because some of this issue is broader than just the school system. And I'm very happy to say that we're pleased with the county council's response to our needs, and they recognize that we need more social emotional support in the schools, and they're looking at ways that they could fund that. I actually listened to one of their committee meetings today, and they were trying to decide whether to fund before they even decide what we're going to do with the money. So there is a system response. Everybody recognizes that this is bigger than the school system. They had HHS there, they had the Children's Opportunity Fund, and of course the county council members. And it is going to take all of us to recover from this. So I just wanted to thank you for noting that this is a system problem.
I'd also like to say, I saw Mr. Hamilton put a note in the chat.
You're muted.
Thank you, Byron. I tried not to have that happen again. I see that Mr. Hamilton put a really important point in the chat, and he really is referencing the importance of using language consistently so that the community can connect with the system initiatives in a way that makes that connection happen. And so I just want to elevate that. You know, in our group, it was so interesting. There was a question posed and we used the acronym and we were talking about two different things. And that was a perfect example of why, you know, when we think about the terminology, we want to be consistent with it and make sure that everyone sees it as a way to connect. So I just wanted to elevate that comment because it was important and an important part of our planning that will be important for us to consider. Thank you.
Great. Were there any other comments from the breakout that folks want to share?
Byron, are you taking questions now? You got 2 hands raised.
Yes, go ahead.
I'll go after Ms. Sanker because her hand was up before mine. Then I'll go after her.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Hi, everyone. I'm Shri Sankar. I'm a parent of a first grader at Wingate Elementary. And, you know, one of the things that we have been talking about is, you know, besides the COVID pandemic, or in addition to the COVID pandemic, you know, we have this social justice, national social justice, you know, movement and all of these issues that are coming to head. And I was trying to figure out how to approach combating racism in elementary schools as the NAACP Parent Council rep of a school, which is Wingate Elementary, that's predominantly white. And so I'm just thinking about how to approach that because I feel like it's the ideal and opportune time to teach these young children now about what racism looks like in a way that they can understand it. And I just thought I would put it out there because I wanted to know more about the curriculum or the opportunities for incorporating racial equity and, you know, diversity, equity, and inclusion, all these important elements that's easier to talk about on, you know, on the levels of high school and middle school, but get complicated or difficult when you talk with elementary students. But I feel like it's such a poignant time for them. So, and just to share quickly anecdotally, something I've shared with this group before, you know, my kid was in a breakout room. You know, he's the only Black student there because it's like 5% Black students at his school. And he said, they never call on me first because I'm the brown one. And, it was heartbreaking for me. And I didn't feel like he was right, but I couldn't tell him he was wrong. Right. And that's a hard place for me to be in, but it's also an opportune time for me to be able to teach him something, even though I didn't have the right words, at the time. And I think it's imperative that we as the Brown parents are teaching our kids, but also I see that in a school like this, it's also absolutely essential that we're also teaching our non-Brown and Black students, and how do we do that? How do we bring those conversations to the forefront so that they are learning and figuring out how to process everything that's going on around them in their schools, which is when they, really interact with their peers the most. So thank you.
I really appreciate that you brought this topic up, because one of the things that we've been concerned about for the last few years is our social studies curriculum. And does it do what you're talking about? And when you take that curricular work along with the cultural competency work and the social justice work with the adults, and then the effort right now to do the anti-racist audit to talk about these things, they all come together and provide the potential to really begin to do this in a really systematic and methodical way. And I don't want to take up all the time talking, but this combination of adult learnings is what can change the experience of our children, all of them. And you're right, it's not all children in Wingate Elementary need to understand what we're talking about right here, not just your son. And so you really, hit one of my passion points with this conversation, but many of the staff and the board members could talk more about this so that I'm not the only one talking, but it's this combination of work coming together that must be sustained.
Yeah, I'd like to chime in before we leave, Ms. Sankar. When you talk about the school, you're going to get some resistance because they're going to say, well, we don't have that problem. We don't have that many kids. Okay, so be ready for that. And the other thing that you mentioned, I'm talking with people about the curriculum, and I know that the curriculum is there, but do teachers have a choice of using it? And we don't want that. We want them to know the kinds of things about ethnic groups in the United States. And I was talking to somebody about Asians, and do our kids know that Asians came here to build the railroads? Do they know that they were interned? Do they know that Germans were interned during First and Second World War? I don't think so. And I think these are all part of our history. And the third thing is expectations. When your child says that I'm not called on first, the expectations of the teacher are there. We have a lot of work to do, and we're working on it.
Another
question?
Okay, I'll go ahead and jump in. And my name is Ed Reed, and I'm wearing a parent hat today. I wear a lot of different hats. I'm going to wear the hat of an 8th grader at John Poole Middle School and a 6th grader at John Poole Middle School. And I'll put on the other hat as community leader. I'm a newly elected town commissioner at Poolesville, in the town of Poolesville. And so first, I just want to say thank you for all the hard work that everyone is doing. And I know it's hard work because I've been in there doing the work as an educator as well. When I think about just the social emotional needs of our students throughout the county, I'm a proud Kennedy graduate, by the way. And when I think about just those social emotional needs, I think about our high impact areas, and also think about our areas like the one I'm in, where our minority populations are somewhat low, but the needs are still there. And that need for that social, emotional support. And I would argue there's just a strong need there, because sometimes you'll have kids who might look to the left of them and look to the right of them and say, like me. And so when we think about that support, and then when I think about being on the western side of Montgomery County and just looking at how to make sure people on my side of town have access, because not everyone has the cars, and there's some families. One thing I've learned being in my role as a commissioner here at Poolsville, I've learned there's quite diversity in Poolsville when we began to look at the economic diversity. There's some of the racial diversity, but I think about those who have access to resources and can get in the car and drive down the road, and those who are trying to catch a ride on bus that doesn't ride as frequently as some of the other buses. And so just as we're looking at moving forward and how do we put supports in for all students, I just want to just put a plug in for that western side of Montgomery County. And I'll just share this with you. One year I did serve as a school counselor at Poolsville High School. And I remember the conversations that I had with kids who were suicidal. And I remember sitting down with their parents and sending them to the crisis center and taking the drive to get to the crisis center, and some of the challenges of trying to help them find therapists in this area. And so there are families all over our county who have challenges, but just keep the western side of Montgomery County in the discussion as we look at allocating resources. And once again, thank you for all that you do. And if I could help you, you want to come out to Poolsville, I'm happy to help you. And just a word of inspiration for all of you. When I did run for commissioner, I wasn't sure if I was going to win. I expected to win, but I wasn't sure if I was going to win. But what I noticed is that our county, we're at a time of change. We're at the cusp of change, because when the results came out for the election, and I'll say this in the most humble way, it caught my eye twice, because just the way the numbers went, the way the vote went. And I said, wow, in Poolsville. I said, okay, now it's time to get to work and make some changes. So I would tell you, if we can do some things in Poolsville, and we're going to do some things, then we could do some things in Montgomery County that would benefit all students.
Thank you. Thank you, Ed. Ian, did you have another question? You have your hand up?
Yes, I put it in the chat just in case. It's about as we return to the in-class environment, I'm just wondering whether there will be opportunities presented for the parents to have in-classroom visits during the ordinary day in order for the parent to get a better sense of the student's experience before the end of this year. I think that helps in terms of their guiding the student.
Mr. Pizza, will depend entirely on the rules that surround the health circumstances.
Well, I said I meant virtual. I meant to say virtually.
I don't know. I haven't thought about that. Dr. Mcknight, have you had any conversations about that? That's an interesting question.
No, it is. I actually wrote it down, Mr. Peace.
Yeah, I put it in chat. It's chat to say that way the parent doesn't have the health concerns taken care of by having the parent there virtually.
Right.
But it's in order to get the sense of what's happening or isn't happening in many cases as with those classes.
Let us explore that. That's a great idea that had not occurred to me, I will confess, but great idea. We will explore it. I've been making a list of things. I know Dr. Mcknight is, and we always compare notes, and we'll make sure we follow up on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay.
Good afternoon. Good evening, everyone. So we have twins that are homeschooling at this point. We purposely did that because towards the last semester of the school year last year, our children, particularly, were having difficulties with the curriculum. And in particular, my son and daughter were saying that they've been running over the same thing in the program as they went virtual. So we decided, due to COVID and because of the curriculum, to just start homeschooling the kids. Now, we followed a portion of the curriculum that MCPS has, and we also are following our own pretty much schedule, as probably many parents are with homeschooling. And at this point, we converse regularly with the other parents who have their kids going back to school, Many of them are saying, and this is more than 10 people, saying they've been a bit frustrated with the curriculum because it seems as though their teachers have not been equipped with the necessary tools to be able to run their classrooms in a more efficient manner. So my question to those of you from MCPS, what are the things that you have learned during the COVID period that will improve the curriculum for virtual learning for young people going forward? And what things can parents feel comfortable and confident about in sending their kids back to school when we are able to?
I'll start, and then Dr. Wilson, you can add anything in. One of the biggest parts that we've learned from curriculum implementation, as we've always had it doing virtual learning, really is the pacing. Dr. Wilson spoke about that earlier. So as we implement our curriculum, we've always been able to learn about implementation of a curriculum through pacing, with expecting to have a daily in-person experience with students, not accounting for all the things that you have to take into consideration in a virtual environment. So I will start by saying that is one of the biggest learnings that we've had this year, when we had to pivot to a virtual environment, and really thinking about what were the things that we had to adjust quickly as it related to pacing. And we heard that from our teachers firsthand. I think it was at the end of last spring when we first got online, and our teachers were continuing with the curriculum. One of the first pieces they brought up was, we should look at pacing of that. And so thinking about how much content we are exposing students to, and then taking into consideration how that content plays out in the learning in the virtual environment, is one of the first pieces that has to be addressed as we think about virtual schooling beyond, and how that has to be taken, how that has to be adjusted as it relates to the curriculum. Dr. Wilson, anything else you'd add that we've learned from COVID-19 in relation to curriculum?
Just a couple of other quick thoughts. One is just the courses in the delivery at any given time that a student is engaged in. Certainly in a 4-year period in high school, students have ample time to get their credits required to graduate. But you can't take a 7-period day and deliver that virtually. There's just not enough blocks of time, especially when people are concerned at the same time about screen time. But what Dr. Mcknight covered in terms of pacing and that, and the other thing too, I would say, is we have gotten pretty creative, and I think very good at some of the supplemental services to our ESOL students and our special education students. And I think we need to continue to concentrate on that, because we know, in our new virtual program, we will have students that need those services engaged. And I think we've learned a lot from that in terms of assistive technology, and have perfected that. I'm quite proud of what we've been able to do there. So there's been many learnings, but there's also been some celebrations, as we move forward. But that's a great question.
I'll just add in quickly that as we're thinking towards next year in the virtual academy, there is different curriculum and how it's designed for online versus how it's designed for in-person. What we did was transfer in-person curriculum to a virtual space. As we were having planning time to really develop, thinking about developing specific curriculum that's meant to keep pace in an online environment and really move forward. Plenty of states have virtual learning and have curriculum that match that. So that's something that we're exploring moving forward.
Other comment? Okay. With that, I think we're going to take maybe this last question and then transition to the wrap up.
There were 2 hands up, Byron, just FYI. I don't know if you saw them.
Okay. Please. You're on mute, Lisa.
Yeah, I know. Can I talk now? Okay.
No question.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. I have 2 questions. One is, I've had complaints from parents where a teacher is teaching 2 classes, 2 math classes and 2 physics classes at my son's school, which is Bethesda Chevy Chase High. And the kids are complaining because they can't concentrate on their class because the teacher is multitasking by having to teach 2 classes. So that's my first question. And my second question is, in wake of the report of a police officer being fairly rough with an elementary school student, what, if any, plans has MCPS thought about in terms of how to deal with kids who may be having challenges as they transition back from 100% online learning to in-person? And how is that training interacting with their school resource officers and or their other security staff to ensure that there is an appreciation of the challenges that children may face as they come back into the system?
So we'll follow up with BCC and find out what's going on there specifically. And then we've been doing a lot of work with the county government around new models of bringing all of these different topics together, and how do we support our schools in the most meaningful and effective way. And I would like Dr. Mcknight to talk about some of the work that she's been doing and leading specifically with the police department, with the county government, with HHS, all of these things to bring new models to the school system of internal teams and external teams working together on behalf of kids in very different ways than we've ever seen before. But Dr. Mcknight, you want to share some of what you've been doing in that area, because you've been doing a lot over the last 2 months.
Sure, absolutely. I'll start by saying, I just have to commend our board, because when we were bringing presentations even prior to the pandemic, one of the questions the board posed to us is, how are we looking at student discipline and the disparity that may exist in student discipline, and really pushing us to think about what are the factors that are giving us the disparity between groups of students, racial groups, ethnic groups, whatever it may be, and looking at ways to make sure that we're building really supportive environment for our students in all of our schools. So that conversation started before the pandemic. And as the pandemic started, I must say, Montgomery County really at that point said, really put a focus on, given the needs of this pandemic, given a number of things that we've learned about our program, and I know there was much conversation around evaluation of our SRO program as a part of this discussion, that it was important for us to think about, one, how do we create those conditions for students in the school, but then how do we also, in an appropriate way, have the external support support us, and what does that look like in a way that is supportive of all of our students. And so, County Council actually would have us come and really talk about how is MCPS working with the Department of Health and Human Services, and how are you working and building those partnerships to support and look at social work models, and how that can exist within the school, and how that can be supported and built in a way where families don't have to come to a school, express a problem, and then the school give them a resource, and then they have to independently then reach out to social services. But how are we building those pieces in together? So that has been the gift, quite frankly, in the pandemic, in which the county said we have an interest in, school system, Department of Health and Human Services, really thinking about how does your work intertwine, and how do you depend on resources for one another to support the needs of the students. And so we as a system have been working with those county government agencies to do just that. And the relationship has really grown. I mean, we've been so successful in vaccinating our staff because of the relationship and work that we've developed over the months with Department of Health and Human Services. And so those relationships have morphed into us naturally having these conversations often and saying, how do we not work separately, but how do we think about how we better connect and support, because we're serving the same families. So I just highlight that as a benefit. So we've been talking about models of social work, looking at models of other school districts, and how do we support that? And of course, evaluating all of the factors, our SRO program included, just to say, what are the things that we've learned from our previous programs that we want to make sure we consider and put in place in the future to provide a supportive environment for our students, all of our students, so that they feel safe and feel valued, in every school in Montgomery County Public Schools. And then what does that look like in terms of how others work with us to achieve that goal? So that's generally where
I want to lean in a little here. I'm Megan McCoy, and I'm a parent at East Silver Spring Elementary, where the incident occurred with one of our administrators. And we, as a PTA, and me as the parent rep to the NAACP, are really glad. Thank you, Lisa, for bringing up this topic. What I'd like to know is more about front office personnel and that selection process, and what can the board do to ensure that the equitable needs of a community are met by the representatives they encounter when they come into the office, as well as linguistic needs that need to be met in certain communities right out the gate when a parent or a student comes into the front office. What can we learn from this experience? Because as a parent rep, one thing we've definitely delved into this issue since it became public information in January, because, you know, our school did not communicate to our family community that this incident occurred, number one. We thought that was a blatant exemption. They justified their actions by saying to us as a parent community, the choice was made because it involved only one student. Since it did not apply to a broader population of students, that incident was not made public to the families as like a letter going out to our community. And many, many parents have festered on that since the news 1 year after the incident was released within our community. So that communication, maybe it could have come from the superintendent's office had it been escalated in the right way at the right time. But that was a decision by the administrators at our school that they made based on their best practices that as a community, we do not think are really in the best interests of our community and our stakeholders as parents. The other piece of that is then where do we come in as like the board? Could we as a PTA then just put together the thoughts of the parents from the surveys we're collecting in our community, which have gone out now in Amharic and in Spanish and in English to those families that have either been impacted directly or indirectly by this incident and MCPS's watch? Can we send that to the board so that we might help you all bite off a piece of this to chew on for some equitable stake in what's happening around the anti-bias, anti-racism work? Because this incident could have been any school in Montgomery County. And unfortunately, so many of us who have matriculated through it, I have a 7th grader and a 2nd grader. They've both gone through ESS. My 2nd grader is there now. And this student is still a part of our community right now. The police officers are still serving in Montgomery County in our community right now. We want them removed. And we want to have a way to participate in the selection of other staffing practices at our school level where we can, maybe around assistant principals or whatnot. And we would like to be able to send you our thoughts as a community on that. Thank you, Lisa, for bringing that up. And thank you, Dr. Mcknight, for what you shared on the approach, but pushing in a little there because it's a big one.
No, we appreciate that. And I just want to, it was a loaded question. A couple of things I just want to say. You bring up some great points. One connection I'd like to make really quickly, and that is you bring up representation in a school and how does that representation reflect the community that that school serves. One of the areas that we focused on in the anti-racist audit, and this is why it was very critical for us to include so many members of our community in that, is that we have, and over time done a number of different outreach to figure out how do we achieve that. There's an area within that audit that really says, the title of it is diversity within staff. And that's why that area is there to focus in on exactly the very thing that you're talking about. We have a very diverse community in Montgomery County. We know that we want our staff in our buildings to reflect the communities that they serve. So, and how we go about, number one, reaching those to come into our school so that our community members can feel comfortable, can connect with them. And so things like language and those things are not barriers, are critically important. And then we also have to think about not only how do we get them into our schools, how do we retain them and make them feel like a part of the culture within our system so they actually feel, connected and want to remain as employees and connect with the community in a way to avoid there being, misunderstanding around norms when we have to address those pieces. So I just wanted to say thank you for raising that. And that is a priority to the board and to the system. and one that we very much are committed to focusing on in the future. I know Dr. Smith wanted to say something.
I was just going to say yes. Please send any information you would like to send, both to the board office or to our office, or we'll share it with them, or they'll share it with us. Please, we would welcome
And
that.
I will put a personal thanks out to, Mr. Johns. Thank you, Byron, for everything you do in our community. Because as a PTA board, it was very difficult for us to respond to the incident on behalf of our community and respond to the privacy of the mother when we didn't have direct communication with the parent for whatever various reasons. I think the nature of being a PTA is complicated because of that teacher piece, which means administration. And it really hurts our ability to be understood by our community members when we maybe want to push in and lean into policy, but really people want us to right now create an activity on their behalf, maybe a march or some other structure of, justice seeking that is very actionable in the moment. And to be responsive as a parent volunteer group, it's challenging, and we need more support from MCPS to be successful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. I want to throw one little memorabilia. Looking back a year ago, Jack and Monifa and all the rest of us and all the board members were there. And I know we feverishly worked from March 16th, I think was the date, right up till about August 5th. We were feverishly working to open schools, and we were plowing down. And I think Jack, you and other members of the cabinet and some of the board members took a trip to College Gardens and tried to take a walk a day in the life in the schools. And you finally concluded this isn't going to work. And we went all virtual. So I'll just throw it out there while we are all hoping and hopeful that we will all have our kids back in school come the fall semester. Do we have a plan B? If this COVID thing has managed to be one step ahead of us at every turn, it seems like. And I mean, it just seems we should at least not be, and I just want to give public notice and credit to Jack through all the other things going on. I came to Jack and Monifa and to this board especially back in last September to say, hey, by the way, we have a group of kids, we have families and part of our community that virtually just isn't working for. And it was really but for Jack stepping in and allowing us to stand up equity hubs. At that time, and we eventually ended up serving 1,400 kids, but there were kids who were just not connecting, not thriving. And really, this board and this cabinet really helped make that possible to bring equity into practice. So I just want to make sure and think about, while we certainly want, after the last year, want all the schools to be open, I also want to make sure we're prepared to deal with whatever twist may come forward. So any comments on that?
Sure, there is a plan B. Plan A is to have school in the typical fashion, and that's what we'll work toward and commit our energies toward. Plan B is to literally daily and weekly monitor what's happening and then adjust as appropriate. It was actually about July 17th last year when the local health officials and the state health officials said, you're not going to get there. According to all the metrics that are in place by the first day of school, you're not getting there. And that's when because we were monitoring what was happening. And so we speak oftentimes daily, sometimes weekly, with both the state health officials and the local health officials. And so we'll plan, but we'll constantly be ready to shift as we see what happens. The real difference this spring, frankly, between this spring and last spring, is the vaccination and how that continues to roll out and what effect it has as we see those sorts of things happening. One of the pieces of good news when we looked yesterday at the data, and we look at it every single day, is that even though we had spring break and a lot of people moving about, that we've seen a very small bump up instead of the very large bump up that was feared and predicted. So, you know, it's moving in the right direction, but that we should in no way sit back and say, oh, well, we're all set then, no problem, everything's great. We've got to constantly be looking at it, and we've got a whole team of people, some on this call, Derek, Essie, Monifa, that are all looking at this every single day with me and talking about it, and then making sure we're shifting, you know, wherever we have to. But very good point, and one that nobody likes to hear said out loud, but it's true, Byron.
Exactly. I mean, I know I hate to be the party spoiler, but you know, this isn't the first time we've been fooled by this. This is a very precocious, you know, novel virus, to say the least. With that said, we're about at the end of the day. We need to, again, they've had a very long day. This is a tremendous support by having the board members and our MCPS members and staff and friends here. They have really put in a long week already, and we thank them for their commitment to this partnership and for their commitment to our community, for the work they do. They don't hear it often enough. I know you get a lot of slings and arrows and a lot of frustration to being taken out on you, unfortunately, but we do appreciate the work on behalf of the community. So I just want to publicly state that, make sure that at least if you didn't hear it any other time this week, you got at least one thank you for the work that you do. Okay. With that said, let's give a quick hand for our friends there. I'm going to turn on a poll. I would ask you before you sign off, just take the poll. But again, thank you for the Board of Ed being here. Thank you for Superintendent and the acting interim superintendent, and for the other cabinet members and other parts of the staff. So we appreciate you, and we look forward to seeing you again. Here's the poll. Take care.